Hi, welcome back to the next episode of Our House DIY. This one we're going to be tackling the damp patches down here, here and here that I talked about in my project planning video. So stick around while we get the plaster off and we get some lime on the walls to help everything dry out and stay dry. We're getting the fireplace sorted, so we'll keep stripping back this wall up, so I'm going to take all the plaster off. We see when we get up here I might stop shy of the picture rail, but we'll start hacking and see how we go. Put the dust fan on. I don't know whether you saw as I was taking this plaster off, but this area was black, so I've had to dig a bit further, and yes, we've got a hole in the chimney breast based on the soot marks. It's obviously sometime since the fire's actually been used, so the picture rails had to come off, so we'll work out how to patch that. I'll cut the brick and slip an insert in. Also, we've got this stone lintel here. You can see all these pattern marks. This is where it was chipped before to give a key. It's quite interesting because you've got this sort of half lap joint on the corner as well, and another big lintel. And I know from inside, and you can see here, there's another lintel going back there. But I don't understand because it wouldn't be freestanding. Also, you've got a different arrangement. You've got a pillar of bricks here at one level, another pillar of brick, another row of bricks here at another level. This whole bit is set in. In here, the plaster, when I took it off, was really quite thick. But I'll bring it all back to a uniform finish. So I'm prepping this wall to take this gypsum off. You can see where the plaster's blown, etc. So first thing is to take the skirting board off. It's modern skirting board, it's fixed with raw plugs, and I know it would have been done when they did the gypsum, so I'm not upset about taking it off. We've got damp so much we've already started to get rot and mould in the back. You can see the holes drilled by the guy when he injected the damp course, or so-called damp course. You can see it didn't work. All this plaster's blown. You've got salts and stuff coming through there. But what's really interesting is this hole here. It doesn't show very well, but behind here there's actually a drain with all sorts in it. And I know that because the other side of here in there is what we use as a study now, but before it was a wet larder, so I know that's quite a damp room. So what I'll do is I'm not going to take all this off, so I'll mark a line and I'll take the lower half with all the gypsum off. I'm taking this wall off. Quite an interesting mix on this one. We can see it here. You've got a gypsum skim over cement, which was over the top of the bricks. This underlying white is one of the early forms of tanking. So there's been problems on this wall twice. Unfortunately, quite a lot of it is sticking to the bricks, but they'll be all right. What is interesting, you can see the really nice lime mortar with the aggregate underneath. So once I get all this off and clean, I'm happy that this wall will dry out nicely. Just continuing to take the skirting board off as I work around, and this one's really interesting. You've got the gypsum, and then they bodged in a load of slate because it was too big a gap for the ton of sticky flex they used. You can see the raw plugs from these new skirtings and the pink of the gypsum plaster. This one, we've got newspaper behind it to make up the gap. I wonder whether we can work out when it's bodged. Can't be that old because this is sticky flex on top. So there we go, Friday Times, 1st of July, 1988. And that goes back to when this house was majorly renovated. So that's obviously when they put on the gypsum. Look at that. There's no way. It should have been properly skimmed and in lime. So this wall's coming off anyway. So I'm just looking at prep for this cupboard, and I don't know whether you can just see here. This is the top of the cupboard, and here we've got some hazelnuts. How they're in here, they must have got into the floor or something. But let's take this piece of wood down because I'm going to plaster this top. Yeah. There we go, hazelnuts. But that's much better. I can get some lime plaster on that and sort that much better than a crude piece of wood. Here you can see some areas where it's dry, and this is all the moisture that's been trying to come out for years but has been trapped here between cement. You can also see the pattern on the wall here where the wall had got soaked as well and wasn't able to breathe. You've got a similar pattern on the bottom of the fireplace, and although not quite so clear, you can see it here. These lower sort of 2.5 courses of bricks, particularly the bottom course with the damp proofing inverted commas holes, just goes to show that the injected damp course doesn't work. Here we have a couple of really good demonstrations of why lime works. These are bits of wood that are put into the bricks that enables the door frame to be fixed. You see this has got like chisel marks on it where it was designed to help the lime stick. This one is above the plaster render, which was from about here. So down here was wet, up here was lime, so dry. This piece of wood is lovely, perfectly sound. This one down the bottom is just completely rotted out because it's wet. So that one will need fixing. There's another one here that's wet, and we've got a bunch around here that will need fixing. This is some of the gypsum that comes off. You can see it just comes off in massive layers where it's just, the water's just got behind and it's just blown straight off. So tidy up this mess, and then we'll have to start looking at letting it dry out a bit and getting some dubbing coats on the big bits and fix some of this rotten wood. Now let's fix this nasty surprise from plastering. We've got the brick face cleaned up. I've cut a new brick to suit, so we'll just bed it in with some muck. There we go, that problem's fixed. So we can get on with plastering the main wall now. The first stage in lime plastering is what's called dubbing out. And there we're filling any large holes, any big irregularities. We're not looking for smooth, we're just looking to build up some thickness. Our next layer after that, our scratch coat, will be a thicker coat again. But if we try to fill it all in one go, it'll be too much. I mean, that's that deep, so we'll bring it out in 2 steps. Any big lumps, I've already worked down. I've got a knocked up mix of 3-to-1 grit lime with hair in it, so I'll start knocking in some of these holes. One of the techniques when you're dubbing out is you fill any really big holes with bricks, loose stone. You see, I fitted this brick here a few days ago after I took the plaster off. Now I've got this hole here that I need to start building up. Quite often it's easier to actually harl or throw the plaster in some of these, so that's what I'll do here, watch. Work it up into a nice cohesive dollop. And just throw it in. Gives you a good adhesion. We've got another section missing here where I think there was another piece of sodden wood, so I've cut some bits of brick to fit, so we'll get those bedded in. When I'm trying to fit for things like this, I really make sure I butter the top and the ends. I've already put muck in the bottom, so whilst a load will scrape off as we fit it, some will still work its way in there. And then we'll just work some in off the trowel. So I'm still working on building up the coats. This one I need to dub out or build up. It'll probably end up being 4 coats even. Problem when it's rough like this, it's really difficult to float on or use a float and hawk to get your first coat down. So the traditional way of doing that is to harl it on. Posh word for saying throw it on. You use a harling trowel, take a little bit on your harling trowel and then you throw it on. And you just work your way across the wall, and this helps it get into all the nooks and crannies and crevices, and it will just build up, and then you can go over and float it on. You lose some, but a lot of it does stick. So we just work over it. We've got a dubbing out coat on some of the big thicker areas we've built up. So now this needs to set up for about a week. The time is one of the things that really makes lime plaster slow and expensive. In my own time, it's not a problem. I do this weekend and I'll come back probably in 2 weekends and start getting the first full coat on. So for you, that will be now. I'm going to knock up for the first full scratch coat now. This is a 3-to-1 lime putty, which I'll put in each bucket. We'll get a couple of handfuls of synthetic fibre. Traditionally it was horsehair, nowadays a lot of it's goat hair, but you can also use synthetic. I like to knock it up the day before, because when you knock it back up the next day it's got a lot more fluidity. It seems as if it's a lot better plasticised, and because it's lime it won't go off overnight. All you need to do is just cover the top with a bit of plastic, keep it inside so it doesn't freeze or get extra rain into it, then knock it up and away you go. I may be here sometime. It will take some time to knock it together, but once you do, the volume diminishes as the lime gets moved in between, and it actually starts to flow really quite well. You've just got to take your time, make sure you get all the way around, keep bringing the mix up and down through the bucket, get into all the corners, and then every now and then give the edges a scrape. I've got the hair dumped on top of the first mix, now I'm going to give it another mix and then it will rest overnight. There we go, nice and hairy, 3 to 1. I've not added any water to this at all. This is just from sand from the builder's merchant, which is outside, and mature, well-soaked lime putty. So we'll let it sit up overnight and then I'll knock it back up again tomorrow morning. And then we'll see if we need to add any water. At the moment, I don't think I will. I'm wetting out in preparation for my first full scratch coat. Here you can see I've wetted out, the wall's changed colour. Here it's dry. I wetted out once yesterday morning, once yesterday afternoon. I'll do it again fully this morning and then I'll do each wall before I go, because it really does suck the water out. If you don't do this, it will take the moisture out of the plaster itself and it will affect the quality of the plaster and the bonds to the wall. But watch how quickly it soaks in. Now, there's a lot of water there, but it's not running down. This will all get sucked in. We're looking to get the bricks nice and damp, but not flooding or soaking wet with free water on the surface. If there's free water on the surface, again, the plaster won't stick properly. So I'll keep working my way around the room now. Just to show you how much it sucks up the water. 5 minutes later, I've just been around the room. I'll come back to this, and you'll see some of these bricks will still take water. See? Colours changing on some of these bricks where they're still soaking up water. If you didn't do this, this water would come out of your lime plaster and dry it too fast. We're working along getting our scratch coat over the whole wall. It's not super smooth, doesn't have to be. We're just basically building up thickness here. This wall doesn't actually have that much. This has got maybe 20 mil of plaster, whereas over there you're up to 50 mil plaster. So this wall and the one behind me is fairly thin, but we'll just get the scratch coat on and then we'll come back once it's set up a bit and put the actual scratches on. Just work our way around to trowel follow on. That's the scratch coat, all finished, dried up. I've been around with my float or a big spatula, scraped off all the loose dangly bits, given it a good brush down so there's no loose stuff to come through into the next coat. But as I always say, you've got to wipe down before any work. This is really dry, this will really suck the water out of whatever we put on top. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give it a good spray down, and then I'll leave you on time lapse for 10 minutes and you'll see how it really sucks in. The water will spread and the colour of the plaster will really change colour. See? That's the effect of water. See how much water this has taken up. If we didn't do this before we put the next layer of plaster on, all the moisture from the plaster we're putting on would be sucked into the dry sub-plaster, and you'd end up with a dry mix. It would crack really quickly. The bond wouldn't look very good. So this is a very important step. Now, I'll put you on time lapse. There you go, hopefully that showed how much water was taken up in the first wetting. What I try to do is give it at least 2 wetting down with a good break in between. When it's the first coat straight onto stone, if the stone's really dry or the bricks are dry, I'll even wet down the day before, then it gets really soaked in. So let's see. Yeah, you can see it's changing colour even still when I put this next wash of water on. It's not a lot of water, we don't want it running down. All we're doing is just getting it onto the plaster so it soaks in, so that the plaster won't take the water out of the lime plaster. So I'll go around the whole room one more time and then I'll start putting. Time to get some muck on the wall. This is the float coat. It's a 3 to 1 thereabouts, but I tend to use 2 parts plastering sand, 1 part grit, 1 part lime. It's haired again. You need the grit content because it makes a stronger mix, but you don't want too much grit because we're starting to look for a better finish. The scratch coat is really about getting the bulk of the wall filled out. You're not really that worried about level. Now we're going to start worrying about getting it level. Not smooth, but level, because after this we'll have 2 top coats to go on. So wall's nice and wet, then time to start putting some muck on. I'll just quickly touch on what I refer to as forehand and backhand, something I never learned, but it's useful to explain. So we've got what I call the forehand, which is where the muck goes on the right hand side of the trowel and we spread from right to left. It's good from working the right side to the across and the bottom up. It's what I use the majority of my stroke. We've also got the backhand, where the muck comes off the left hand side of the trowel and we spread it from left to right. It's important to understand these 2 strokes because it affects how you load the trowel up. So we've got our muck on the wall. Now, if I want to go on a right hand, I will scoop. That's far too much muck. Yeah. But what you then do is you push it on and you just split it in half. You pick it up on the right hand side of the trowel. And then we can apply right to left. The other way around, the left hand side, the backhand stroke, again, we pick it up on the left hand side and then we work left to right. Now I'll just work my way across the root wall tip, don't just dump your trowel in, put it on the side, it'll balance there and keep the handle clean. So this coat's been on an hour or two. Next is we use a wooden float and we just rub back the surface, rub in any cracks, smooths it out a bit. Then we'll wait a day and then we'll come back with this, which looks very similar to just a plain wooden float, but this is the devil float. So rub it back with the wooden float now. So we finished off consolidating with a wooden float. Now the next day, this is something I plastered yesterday actually, we then come over with what's called the devil float, and this has just 4 tiny screws, and all this does is it just adds a little bit of key. We're not looking for the big key like we did with the scratch coat. This is just a very gentle key, so we've got something for the next coat to stick to. The float coat's gone off. Now I've brushed it down, scraped it down with a trowel just to make sure there's no loose bits. I started wetting down last night, I'm wetting it down again this morning, then I'll go and knock up and get the coat on. Now I'll go and bring some spread in and get it on the wall. This is our final coat mix. It's fine sand at about 2:1 with lime putty. Goes on nice and thin. Now we're really starting to worry about the finish, smooth, flat. We will probably sponge off any trowel marks after this first finish coat, and then once it's dried and set up a little bit, tomorrow we'll come back and do a second finish coat. So you have your dubbing out, you have your scratch coat, then you have your float coat, and then you have 2 finish coats. So you'll end up with a 4 or 5 coat system. And the 4 or 5 is whether you dub out or not. So let me get some muck on the walls. So the first finish coat has dried up a bit. It's still quite soft, but my finger doesn't make that much of a dent. So what I now do is I work it with a wet sponge just to smooth off any trowel marks, etc. And then I can keep working over it with a steel trowel to keep it smooth. Keep the sponge on the float nice and clean and nice and wet. This joint is really difficult to blend, so this is a good opportunity to clean up the joint line. Yesterday's top coat's gone on, dried up and set up a bit overnight. it's fairly firm, it's only a thin layer, so we're relying on the strength from the coats underneath it. Now time for the final top coat. This is a very thin coat. This is 2:1 fine sand, no hair. This goes on really, really thin, and then it gets worked with the trowel to smooth it off. Try to avoid too much water because that will cause cracking later on. So what I'll do is I'll work around this wall, then I'll do another half a wall, then I'll come back and re-trowel this wall just to make sure it is nice and smooth and there's no trowel marks, and I'll work my way around the room like that. Just finishing the last of this second top coat. Goes on nice and thick. Once it's on, I now work it smooth. I'm using a lot of pressure here because I'm also after reducing the thickness. There we go. Now I've come this way, this was the last bit, so I'm going to work this up with water. But first, this joint between the original and the new is really difficult, so what I'll do is I'll sponge off the overspread here, which will help tidy up this joint. If you're doing the whole wall, you wouldn't have this problem. And I do sometimes wonder whether it's easier just to do the whole wall. Lots of water, but this sponge will fill up with the sand, so you've got to keep scraping off on the side of the bucket. Now, clean the float in the bucket, brush the nice clean float, and then a bit of water, and this will come up nice, clean, smooth, finished surface. You're not taking much off, you've just picked up a bit of the fat on the trowel. Let's say we need a clean trowel, so we need to keep wiping this off. Bit more water. Water helps it float, stops it dragging, brings the fat to the surface so you get a nice smooth finish. If you just use too much water, you'll wash the fat away and you end up with a gritty surface. This way, bit of water, steel trowel, you get a smooth surface. just work any rough bits and then go back over them. Work any corners and any edges. Some people will argue that this takes the lime out, or washes the lime out, but this is a very rich mix, so I'm not worried about that. Because I'm using fine aggregate, I've not got much grip, or hardly any come through, but every now and then you'll get the odd bit come through. Just pick it out and work back over the surface. There we go. Time to tidy up. There we go. This room in what's traditionally a 4-coat lime system. So we went through the dubbing out, the scratch coat, the float coat, and the 2 finish coats. I've just finished the last one. Now I'll let this cure and dry up for a good few weeks. Then the first coat will be a watered down lime coat, and then we'll go on to some pigmented lime top coats. I hope you found this interesting. If you did, please think about giving it a like and a subscribe, and stick around for the next one. While I've been doing this, I've been working on the fireplace. I had to completely remove this and rebuild a chunk of this wall, so that's a separate video, so please think about watching that one.